your regatta with USRowing. We've had a lot of questions about this, so I thought I'd go through as many of the aspects as I can, and then you can chime in with your questions. Um, the questions I've gotten is, what does that mean from an insurance standpoint? What's covered under this policy? What's not covered under this policy? Do I need additional coverage? There's a list of things that are covered under your policy, and we're going to talk about those. There's the venue, the host organization, the regatta committee, your volunteers, your referees, your participants, your spectators, your vendors, your rented equipment, and then last but not least, valet parking and shuttles. We do have questions about that. The first is your venue. Obviously, you're renting or leasing a property, and the owner of the property is going to want a certificate of insurance, listing them as an additional insured, which our office can provide. Once you have registered your regatta, we're able to issue the certificates. And then there's also those people who you might be using their parking lots, or surrounding facilities for various different things, and we can provide them with certificates of insurance as well. Some property owners require specific forms. Not a problem. We're able to give anything they need. We've never really had an issue with providing proof of coverage to the property owners, but sometimes it's a municipality and they have a bunch of hoops you have to jump through, but we're usually able to accommodate all of those people. The host organization. The host organization is covered under the general liability policy or the regatta policy. So if there's any bodily injury or property damage and they get blamed in some way, the policy would respond on their behalf. Some examples of things that we've had happen is a tent blew over that the host organization installed. It damaged a third party's car. The claim was paid. We had a spectator trip over an extension cord that was run by the host organization. The policy paid. We had a car driven by a volunteer hit a pedestrian, and it was paid. The regatta committee. Sometimes there's a regatta committee that is in addition to the host organization or a subcommittee of the host organization. And they also are covered under the general liability policy. One thing to note, general liability is for bodily injury and property damage. There's another component. If someone accuses them of discrimination or unfair practices, either the host organization or the regatta committee, there should be a directors and officers policy in force. Most of you guys do have a directors and officers policy in force for the host organization, and if the regatta committee is appointed by the board of directors, they're also covered under the directors and officers policy. In some instances, we have regatta committees who are completely separate from the board of the host organization, and some of those regatta committees take out their own directors and officers policy. It's $380 for $1 million of coverage. So depending on how your organization is set up and how your regatta committee might be appointed, you may want to consider an additional directors and officers policy. You can talk to me about that. Your volunteers. There's lots of volunteers that go on with your regatta, and there's launch drivers, there's cart drivers, there's timekeepers, there's people serving food, there's people running back and forth. All of your volunteers are covered under the general liability policy. You don't have to tell us who they are. As long as they're a volunteer of the regatta, they are covered under the policy. I do want to note one thing. If your volunteer becomes injured, there's a small amount of med pay coverage under the general liability policy of $5,000. You can, if you want to, purchase an excess medical policy for strictly your volunteers. It's $250 for a year, so it'll cover all your events, all your volunteers at all times, and we can talk about that. It's just something I throw out there. I have a few clubs that buy it because they have a lot of volunteers and just want to make sure that their medical expenses are picked up if they get injured while volunteering for the club. But going back to the general liability under your regatta policy, all your volunteers are covered under that policy. Referees are always covered. They're covered under the general liability policy, the excess medical policy, and USRowing's D&O policy. They are fully covered. The participants. For a registered regatta, your participants all must be USRowing members, whether they are using USRowing insurance or someone else's insurance. We have already determined that they have insurance. We've already collected their proof of coverage. So we already know that they have coverage. So your participants all have their own general liability insurance. So if there is an accident out on the water where one boat hits another boat, it would go to that club's general liability insurance to pay for the property damage or bodily injury of the other club. So you know when you register your regatta that everyone out there does have their own insurance. I mean, it could be that they determine the reason for the accident was the fault of the regatta committee because they didn't direct the boats correctly, and then that would go back to the regatta policy and again would be covered under the regatta policy.
Wendy, just real quick. So there was an early question. Tom asked if you could discuss coverage for volunteers and chaperones for regattas and club practices. It says here that they have juniors who have parents who do things like riding in a safety launch, not just coaching. It's just them being helpful. And you already kind of touched upon that people who volunteer at an event like this, they are being covered under the policy that is provided.
Right, even practices, they're covered.
Yep.
Okay, spectators. You will have, a spectator who may get injured while they are at your event. Sometimes it's your fault, sometimes it's not your fault, but I have a few examples here. One I already discussed. We had a spectator trip over an electrical cord, and the policy paid for the spectator's medical bills. We had a spectator hit by a golf cart, and the policy paid for the spectator's medical bills. We had a spectator step into a large hole on the grounds of the event. Now, in this instance, the organizer did not dig the hole, and the property did not belong to them, but the insurance carrier felt that, perhaps they should have put a cone there or something to indicate there was a hole there. The spectator just didn't see it, so the policy did pay for that person's medical bills. We had a branch fall on a spectator. This claim is still open because the municipality is saying that it was the club's, they were the one hosting the regatta, therefore their insurance should pay. Our policy is saying, no, we didn't trim the trees, we didn't do anything, we didn't disturb the trees or hang anything from the trees, and apparently it fell from pretty far up. And so they're fighting amongst themselves to decide whose policy is going to pay, just because we weren't really responsible for taking care of their trees. I think the way it'll turn out is the municipality's policy is going to pay. We didn't do anything to their trees. We didn't, like I said, we didn't hang anything from their trees or climb up there and try to put signs up or anything like that. And this was just, there was a loose limb up there, and when the wind blew, it came down and it hit a spectator, which is really unfortunate. We had another claim where a pedestrian was walking on the sidewalk on their way to the regatta, and they fell on a broken piece of sidewalk, and the claim went back and forth between the owner of the property and the regatta organizer. And in the end, it was the owner of the property's policy that paid because the regatta organizer really wasn't responsible for making sure the sidewalk was, not chipped, and that was really up to the property owner to take care of that. But the policy paid for the defense costs of the regatta organizer, and in the end, the judge decided that it went to the property owner. So those are just some examples of your spectators. Your vendors. Your vendors should all have their own liability insurance. Many times, if you're using a public park, they're going to ask that the vendors provide proof of insurance, naming them as an additional insured. You should also be getting a certificate of insurance from them, naming the club or the organizer as an additional insured. Our policy does not include coverage for vendors. Everyone should have their own insurance. You may have parents who set up a hot dog stand, to help the club out as like a fundraising kind of thing. And those people are considered volunteers of the regatta and would be covered under the regatta policy. But if you have like, someone selling clothing, someone selling socks, someone selling water bottles, someone selling hot dogs, all those people should have their own insurance. You should be asking them for certificates of insurance, naming the club as an additional insured. And like I said, the municipality may also want a certificate of insurance from them, naming the municipality as an additional insured. If you have someone selling beer, like a beer garden, those people should have not just general liability, but they should also have liquor liability. And you should be asking them for that. If you guys decide that you're going to sell the liquor or one of your volunteers is going to sell the liquor, you need a liquor liability policy. In some states, you have to get a license for that. And we can provide the liquor liability coverage. The cost is $500 per event. And Philadelphia will require your volunteers to do the TIPS training, which is like online, and it costs $40 per person and takes about 45 minutes to do, and then you get a certificate of completion. It's really just making you aware of when someone's intoxicated and when to stop serving them and that kind of thing. But I know we do have regattas now that have beer gardens and things like that, and depending on who's serving the alcohol, that's who should be providing the liquor liability coverage. Rented equipment. I know that you guys rent equipment, cameras, TVs, golf carts. All of those things are covered for liability insurance, but the policy does not provide coverage for damage to that equipment. So you need to make sure that your equipment carrier can either endorse your policy in some way to cover that equipment while you have it, or you buy it from whomever you rented it from. But when it's out there, at the regatta, that stuff does get damaged. So you need to make sure you have property damage coverage for it in some way. The same thing with the launches and boats and oars that you might borrow for your event. You've got to make sure that your equipment policy is covering the stuff that you're borrowing, and that you are not just, depending on your USRowing regatta policy to do it, because it will not pick up coverage for that stuff. We can offer a policy, but it's $250 for a one-day event. Your equipment policy should be able to, provide coverage for that stuff. So just be careful about the stuff that you're, renting or borrowing or leasing. You need to make sure it's insured somewhere. We've had clubs ask us about valet parking, and we've also had them ask about shuttles. Valet parking, Philadelphia was not willing to pick up that exposure. I went to another carrier outside of Philadelphia, and I got a quote for one club. They wanted $750, and no one has purchased that policy to date. It's not a practice they wanted to pick up. You don't, it would be a matter of them getting driver's license from the people who are doing the valet parking, and it just wasn't something they were willing to contemplate under the regatta policy. Shuttles, you do get hired liability insurance. So if you rent a shuttle vehicle, the liability would apply. You would need physical damage coverage for that shuttle. We've also had clubs who rented the shuttle with a driver. Then you don't need to worry about insurance. That's going to come from the shuttle company. They'll have their own insurance for providing that. I guess that is for regattas where the parking facilities are far, for your spectators to walk. I think some people put some of the patrons in golf carts and take them down, and that's another way to do it. Again, the liability coverage is there for your people operating golf carts.
The only question that was typed in the meantime is Bill asked that he does a Row for the Cure event and a small number of participants are former high school rowers who are returning to participate in a fundraiser, and that some masters may join. He says they may no longer have maintained their USRowing membership. Bill, so to answer that question, a basic membership and a signed waiver are a requirement for them to be enrolled under the insurance policy. In terms of them having to sign up again, yes, they have to become basic members of USRowing and sign their waiver, but they should be able to compete under the name of the host organization if that is a rowing club. So there is a small fee for them, and they do need to like rejoin USRowing if their membership has lapsed. But that is a general requirement for every single sanctioned event, except if you do an indoor regatta. Wendy did not touch upon that, but just to add, for those of you who host indoor regattas, there is still the $250 fee that we had in previous seasons. Nothing for that registration has changed, but in addition, we now offer a $500 registration, which allows you, this is strictly for indoor events, which allows you to have walk-ins and have people from CrossFit gyms who are not rowers to compete at the event, to be covered without them having to become USRowing members, simply because it's not a on-the-water event. These are people who may not be interested in rowing aside from being on an erg. So there is now a way to cover that. However, if your event is on the water, the requirement will always be that everyone attending is at least a basic member of USRowing.
So obviously you have other events that go on at your boathouse, and I just wanted to touch on these quickly. We've had questions about these, like team potluck dinners. That coverage is included under your USRowing policy. Any type of fundraiser, any type of team activity, at your boathouse is all covered. A New Year's Eve party for members only and their guests. Coverage is included under your USRowing policy for that. Even if alcohol is being served, we consider that to be host liquor coverage, which is included under your general liability. Now you have a New Year's Eve party open to the general public. And the way I go about this is I say if you're selling tickets and alcohol is included, I recommend purchasing the liquor liability coverage. I just think if you start selling tickets to the general public and there's liquor involved, I would cover yourself and purchase the liquor liability coverage. So there's a difference between the host liquor coverage that's included on your general liability and then the liquor liability when you're selling alcohol. So I say selling tickets open to the public, err on the side of purchasing the liquor liability coverage. Fundraiser, silent auction, no alcohol included under your USRowing policy. Fundraiser, alcohol is served. Again, if you're selling tickets, I would recommend purchasing liquor liability. If it's a members only event, the alcohol is being served, coverage would be included under the host liquor piece of that. Rental of your facility to third parties for weddings, birthday parties, showers. Coverage for this is not included under your USRowing policy. You should purchase a separate general liability policy. It's approximately $750 for rentals. And you should also be collecting certificates of insurance from the renters that name the club as an additional insured. That should be the policy you have in place when you have a third party renting your facility. You should have a rental policy in place. If liquor is being served by a caterer, the caterer should be providing proof of liquor liability coverage. If the renter is only serving liquor and not selling liquor, most likely they have host liquor under their general liability insurance. They should be providing you with proof of insurance. If you have more questions about that, because it does get kind of touchy when you're doing those rental things, and not everybody does, give me a call and we can walk through it. And then use of your boathouse by another team for practice or weightlifting or for rowing. You should be asking anyone using your boathouse for a certificate of insurance, naming the club as an additional insured. You guys all know they're easy to get. They just have to make a call to their agent and ask for it. There's usually no charge for it. They can have it same day. I mean, you're not asking them to do a lot, but you're just making sure that they have their own insurance in place so that if something does go wrong and you get brought into a lawsuit, their policy is going to protect you because it should. Um, and then you have your own policy to protect you if something happens and it's your fault.
She asked for a Learn to Row participant. They have a Learn to Row program that lasts 4 weeks, and then people may not choose to join the club after that. Do they need to have the basic membership for a 4-week program?
So, are they there on the water 7 days a week for 4 weeks? Are they there a couple days for 4 weeks? I mean, how is the program structured? What I say is, we get this all the time. We have some clubs that do what they call Learn to Row, but in essence, it's a camp. It runs from 7 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 days a week.
She just shared it's 3 days a week.
3 days a week. And it's for 4 weeks. At the end of the 4 weeks, then they decide whether they're going to join the club or they are not interested in rowing. I would call that Learn to Row. I would not put those people on my roster. I would have them sign a paper waiver. After the 4-week period is over, they have to decide whether they're going to become a member or not become a member. And at that point, they need to be put on your roster if they decide to become a member.
Okay, because I know that in the past this question has come up, and one of the things that was always discussed was the concern where maybe an insurance company might say if people are paying you a fee for a situation where people return to the boathouse multiple times to row, whether that's called Learn to Row or it's considered a camp, they may say, well, that is a membership more so than someone just trying out rowing.
Right. And I get this a lot, but I do get a lot of people that say, after 2 days, it's not enough time for them to determine whether, this is what they want to do or it's not what they want to do. So I say, if it's, a couple days a week for a couple hours, and it goes for a period of, 4 weeks, I think that's reasonable. I don't think it's reasonable if it's 5 days a week and it goes for 8 hours each day. I think that is a camp, and those people need to go on your roster.
Mm-hmm. It's an auction. Tickets are sold to the general public. The facility manager sells and serves the liquor. They don't see the income, and they don't handle the liquor. Do they still need a host liability policy?
And you're not the facility manager, correct? I would say the facility manager has their own policy, and there's not anything you need to worry about. The host liquor would cover you if something happened, but they've got their own policy in force.
We currently have the three, so he says, please discuss the 3-team rule for coverage without calling it a formal regatta, and what are your options if there is a single or a small group in a 4th program that want to enter in a few events. So basically, what to do if you are going beyond the limits of the tri-meet that is hosted for free, that you do not have to register with USRowing?
That is a USRowing question. I mean, the rule is, if there's more than 3 teams, it's an event and it has to be registered. Am I correct, Jules, in saying that?
It is correct, and we are discussing this in terms of what we can do, and especially in the situation that Jeff describes, where the person joining is not on a additional club, but is someone in a single. I'll have to get back to him, and we may have to just clarify this policy in an email to all regatta directors, because to be honest, this is new. I've not thought about what if it's 3 clubs and everyone else is unaffiliated. For those of you who don't know, if you have people who row as unaffiliated or people who are not able to join a club at the time, people who are championship members as individuals, not basic, but championship members, they can compete as unaffiliated and get full coverage for themselves if they want to compete in a sanctioned regatta. So the requirement would be for them to be championship members and then be unaffiliated. And that, I mean, I have to talk it over, and I will let you guys know a clarification on in terms of the opportunities. But I would say that's not counting as a fourth team, so that should be able to be a part of a tri-meet. But Jeff, let me get back to you on that, and then as well we will add more information. So in the past, the only way to cover your indoor regatta was a $250 registration fee that required all people attending a indoor regatta to be a part of a US rowing club and be a basic member, or just be a basic member. Indoor events, we did allow basic members to row as unaffiliated, but they needed to do the membership. Currently, the basic membership has an administrative fee, and we realize that people who are new to rowing, it might be very confusing for them and kind of a barrier to sign up for an indoor regatta if they are just coming from a gym where they discovered the rowing machine and kind of want to see where they're at in comparison to other people. In order to accommodate that, we have said we're adding another level. It's a $500 registration, so it's an additional $250, but it allows anyone to compete by just signing a paper waiver. Again, this is exclusively for indoor regattas, but it allows your event to have walk-ins, to promote your event with people who are going to CrossFit gyms and who are not interested in rowing on the water at all. And this does not require them to become US rowing members. You can basically just go ahead and have them sign a paper waiver, and then they're good to go at your event, and all the other membership requirements are waived if you register your event at that level. I see Chris's question. Are parents covered using rental vans to a US rowing event? And Paula asks, a potential issue they could have is lawn damage from a trailer driven on the lawn. Would that be covered? And then John's question is, what about, let's see, what about a launch driver who's under the age of 18?
John, there are no age restrictions on the policy, so your launch driver under the age of 18 is covered. So the regatta policy would pay to have the shell fix. If you're talking about at a regatta, that's not a problem. Chris, yes, your parents are covered as drivers for rental vans. There's no problem there. Paula, if in this instance, are you the regatta host? And did you guys drive the trailer onto the lawn and damaged it, or was it another club who did it? Normally what would happen, they would go after the regatta, you guys, because you told the people to park there, and therefore there was damage. And yes, I think the regatta policy would pay for the damage, but they may try to go after the people who actually did the damage, if you could, if they could be located, if you knew who did it. But if you told people to park on the lawn and you were told not to let people park on the lawn, and now the lawn is damaged and the owner of the property is looking to have that fixed, the regatta policy would respond on your behalf.
Can someone get a refund on a regatta registration if they had to cancel the regatta due to heavy debris in the river? Generally speaking, the rule is that once you have the registration and part of the event has been held, preparation or other things, and maybe in this case, people have already started coming to your venue and have parked and things like that, then at that point, the policy has already been covering part of your activities, in which case, it may be a little difficult. However, as US Rowing, we're always willing to look at your specific case. So if you do end up in a situation where you have to cancel your event, or something occurred where like something along those lines, like if you had to cancel your regatta due to circumstances that were very well beyond your control, just reach out to us. We can look at your situation and see if we can work with you, and maybe roll the fee into a future event or something along those lines. So in this case, yes, let me know what the details are, and I can probably help you out. So I hope that answers your question.